Hello there, this is my 16th video for the Autism Information channel, and this is going to be part 2 of the redux of my original video about life with autism. Now, where I left off, I was talking about school and my grades falling at school due to my autism not being recognised at all. From that point on, I had a job at an establishment. I was there for 5 years, loyal service I would say, and unfortunately due to gang bullying and other complications I had to leave, and through this, unfortunately, these two personality disorders manifested themselves. Mental health personality disorders, borderline personality disorder manifested itself through self-harming, and the schizotypal personality disorder manifested itself through magical thinking and depersonalisation, as well as being accompanied by derealisation, which I've done a video about. At this point I had a nervous breakdown. I had to leave this establishment and go to a GP and get referred to a mental health team. Of course, I had these two personality disorders going on, and these were greatly affecting my life. My parents were very worried about my situation at that point in time, as a lot of parents are worried when you have a child with a developmental disability. So with the borderline making me self-harm and suicidal, and the schizotypal personality making my perceptions, depersonalisation, not understanding who I am, along with derealisation, which I have anyway, not connecting with objects or people, it was a very, very difficult time for me. When I was in this mental health practice, I decided that I would tell them what I thought the core problem was, the core reason. I kind of think the analogy I give, if the autism is a solar system, well, if autism is the sun, the core of the solar system, and all the other planets revolving around it are co-morbids, agnosias, mental health personality disorders, tic disorders, metabolic disorders, whatever. To get through all that, you've got to realise the core problem, and in this case it was autism. And I'd said on many occasions to the practitioners, the cognitive behavioural therapists about this. They weren't listening. I said on multiple occasions what I thought I had, and they just would come back with very indecisive and unconcrete answers. For example, when I asked the practitioner this question, I think I've got autism, he said, oh, you've got an unusual personality, and I was waiting for him to elaborate on what he thought that was. Of course he didn't. In my previous video, it gets very similar now, as in my previous video I mentioned about the misdiagnosis. This really was bad. His diagnosis was Asperger traits with a complex personality, and we all looked at each other, because he brought my parents in as well, and we just looked at each other, and my mum actually was the first to say, well, what is that? I'm glad someone did. His answer was it was because I was bullied at school, but again, he wasn't getting to the core reason. Again, the analogy about the sun and the solar system, he wasn't sifting through all that to the core, and his assumption was almost psychoanalysing, which is very old-fashioned. They used to do that with autistic children many years ago, during those that Brunel Bethelheim stage, where the core reason why the child is acting unusual is a mental trauma, but of course he was completely missing the point. There was again a core reason why I was behaving like I was, on top of all the other comorbids. So from that point on, I went to an autism social group, which greatly helped with my confidence, and I'd started doing voluntary work at an autism base, which is a base that is a part of a mainstream school, and that really did boost my confidence. The next thing I decided to do was go into public speaking, and that again has greatly improved my confidence and my awareness of what I could be, because at that point in time I didn't know what to be. I didn't think I was really going to amount to anything, but I found my niche, which was public speaking. I want people to know more about autism. I think it's very, very important that they understand that it's not just one thing, and it affects people in a multitude of different ways. So from that point on, I decided to do something myself about the awareness of autism within the country, and the national prevalence as well, thankfully, is going up, which I'm really pleased about. The other thing I would like to mention is on top of the speeches, well, elaborating more on the speeches specifically, I've spoken about what it's like to have autism. I've spoken to many organisations about that, and I've also delved into different areas also, through going through my experiences at school or work, depending on what people want to hear. The new part to this video, I suppose, the part 2 of the Redux, is getting a formal diagnosis of high functioning autism, and that was in November last year. That has had a great positive impact on my life, because I was getting to the point where I realised I wasn't Asperger's. I don't have Asperger's syndrome. There was something different about my development. There was something different about my perceptions and how I see the world. And of course, if you take a look at some of my, or all of my videos, if you'd like to piece that together, how I perceive the world. But that was a real turning point for me, in understanding myself completely. I don't think it's negative at all to get a diagnosis. It's one of the positive things that has ever happened, and I'm still building up my confidence because of what's happened, sadly, during those years in early employment. And I see it as a slow step every time in the right direction. So really, towards the end of this video, really what I want to say is, it's really important that not only do you get a diagnosis, you get the correct diagnosis, because if you don't, you will not be going down the right path. And I feel really, really strong about people getting misdiagnosed completely, or getting misdiagnosed within the autism spectrum. And that's another strong, I have very strong feelings about that. It's, the key is to get an accurate formal diagnosis, because that will lead you to research the correct things, who you can relate to, and possible friendships that could flower from that. I hope you've enjoyed this video. This is part 2 of my Redux Life with Autism. It's in 2 parts. There's a previous video on my channel. Thank you very much.